Hello, Gaudi, and welcome to this week's comprehension lesson. Now, the book that we're going to read is The Man on the Moon, which is our text for this half term. So, can I answer questions about a text by reading and listening to it? So, I'm going to read this to you, you're going to read it, and then we're going to answer some questions. So, we're going to do both. In this session, we are going to answer questions together. So if you haven't got a whiteboard and pen with you ready already, would you like to go and get it now? Or you need a pencil and a piece of paper. So the activity isn't at the end, it's all the way through the lesson. So pause the video here if you need to go and get yourself organised to get a pencil and a piece of paper or a whiteboard and pen. Jalaf can't find a cursor. Here we go. So I'm going to do the text to you first. This is Bob. Perhaps you heard people talk of him. You may know him better as the man on the moon. So this is our text. And there are two questions below. I'm going to read the text to you again. This is Bob. Perhaps you've heard people talk of him. You may know him as the man on the moon. Our first question is, what is his name? Okay, so what is his name? I'm going to go back and read it, and I'm going to see where can I find the answer. And this is Bob. So what's his name? His name is Bob. Okay, and underneath here we've got Bob. So we're correct. Now it's your turn. Are you ready? What do people call him? Okay, what do people call him? So his name is Bob, but they also call him something else. I'm going to read the text to you again. So I want you to think about this question while I'm reading it to you. What do people call him? This is Bob. Perhaps you've heard people talk of him. You may know him as better as the man on the moon. Pause the video here to think of the answer. If you know the answer, write it on your piece of paper. Pause the video here to have a think. Right, did you get that? The man on the moon. And I know this because it says you may know him better as the man on the moon. Well done. Here's the next piece of text. This is where Bob lives. Every morning he rises at 6 o'clock. He has a cup of tea and 2 eggs for breakfast before leaving for the rocket launch pad. On the way, he stops to buy a newspaper and some chocolate toffees. He's on his way to work. Our question is, what time does Bob wake up? What time does Bob wake up? So it's about him waking up. It's not about him having chocolate toffees or a cup of tea, but it's about him waking up. So we're going to go back to the beginning and we're going to read it together. Here we go. This is where Bob lives. Every morning he rises at 6 o'clock. Okay, what do we think? When do we think he wakes up? Pause the video to have a think. Now, the word that I used to help me was the word rise. Rises means to wake up. In this text, it doesn't say when he wakes up or when he wakes up or woke up. The word they use is rise. Every morning he rises at 6 o'clock. So we could say the sun rises in the morning because it comes up. I could say you could say my mum rises out of her bed before I do. So rise means to wake up. On your piece of paper, can you tell me when he wakes up? Oh, not working. There we go. 6 o'clock. So Bob wakes up at 6 o'clock, and there is our answer here. You can tick your work or fix it. This is where Bob lives. Every morning he rises at 6 o'clock. He has a cup of tea and 2 eggs for breakfast before leaving for the rocket launch pad. On the way, he stops to buy a newspaper and some chocolate toffees. He's on his way to work. Our question here is, what does Bob buy on the way to work? And you're really lucky this morning because I've given you the answers. You've got to choose 2. Let's read the question again. What does Bob buy on the way to work? So, number 1, does he buy 2 eggs? Does he buy newspaper? Does he buy chocolate truffles? Or does he buy a rocket? Does he buy a rocket, dear Mrs. Jalaf? Does he buy a newspaper or does he buy a rocket? So what does he buy on the way to work? You can pause the video here to read it yourself, or if you want to hear it again, you don't press pause and I'll read it again and I'll read this to you. This is where Bob lives. Every morning he rises at 6 o'clock. He has a cup of tea and 2 eggs for breakfast before leaving for the rocket launch pad. On the way, he stops to buy a newspaper and some chocolate truffles. So the question was, what does he buy? And I've spotted the word buy already. Look, here we go. Buy. On the way to the shops, he stops to buy. So I know that my answer is somewhere in the last section over here. Let's read this part again. On the way, he stops to buy a newspaper and some chocolate toffees. Okay. Does he buy 2 eggs? No, he doesn't. He has those for breakfast. Does he buy a newspaper? Oh, look, he buys a newspaper. So we can choose number 2. And he buys some chocolate truffles, which is there. Chocolate truffles. Does he buy a rocket? I don't think it says he buys a rocket. So the 2 correct answers are he buys a newspaper and chocolate truffles. Here's our next piece of text. By 8 o'clock, Bob arrives at the launch pad, changes into his special man on the moon suit and boards his fantastic rocket ship. He must make sure he leaves by 8:45, otherwise he wouldn't make it to the moon by 9. On the way, he reads the newspaper and does the crossword. Let's see what our first question is. What does Bob change into when he arrives at the launch pad? So what does he change into? I know I spotted the word change earlier in the first part up here. If you would like to find the answer yourself by reading it, pause the video here and write the answer. Okay, so if you want to see if you can be a reading detective, see if you can find the answer and you can pause the video here to find the answer. If you'd like to listen to that part again, you can stay online. By 8 o'clock, Bob arrives at the launch pad, changes into his special man on the moon suit and boards his fantastic ship. What does he change into? There's the word changes. So I know my answer's here. Are you ready? You can pause the video here to see if you want to write the answer down. That's correct. His moon suit, he changes into his special man on the moon suit. Right, we've got the same text again and a different question this time, I think. Are you ready? By 8 o'clock, Bob arrives at the launch pad, changes into his special man on the moon suit and boards his fantastic rocket ship. He must make sure he leaves by 8:45, otherwise he wouldn't make it to the moon by 9. On the way, he reads the newspaper and does the crossword. Right, here's the activity that we've got to do. And it says, find the word that means the same as to get on. So there's a word in the text that I've just read to you that means to get on. If you want to be the reading detective by yourself, you can pause the video here. If you'd like some help if you'd like to listen to the text again, you can stay here. By 8 o'clock, Bob arrives on the launch pad, changes into his special man on the moon suit and boards his fantastic rocket ship. So I'm going to give you a clue. The answer is in the top part here. Okay, and the word we're looking for means to get on. Now, does 8 mean to get on? No, but he gets onto something. What does Bob get onto? Does he get onto the launch pad? is there a word that tells us that he gets onto the launch pad? So he arrives, he gets there, but he doesn't get onto it. And looking at the second line, does he get on to the moon suit? No, he gets into the moon suit, so which means he must get onto something. Look, he gets onto his rocket ship. What word can you spot in the last line that shows you that he gets on? And I'm going to see if I can find a different pen. Here we go. The word we're looking for is boards. Okay, is board. So find the word that means the same. To get on means is board. Board means to get on. So when you go on holiday on an aeroplane, you board the aeroplane. You could board a ship, you could board the train, or you could board a rocket ship like Bob. And this spelling is also for the word, this word board, this spelling B-O-A-R-D, is the same as the cardboard that you have that you can make your junk modelling out of. Oh, well, I didn't show you board. There you go. By 8 o'clock, Bob arrives at the launch pad, changes into his special man on the moon suit, and boards his fantastic rocket ship. He must make sure he leaves by 9:15, otherwise he wouldn't make it to the moon by 9. On the way, he reads the newspaper and does the crossword. Our question is, what happens if Bob doesn't leave on time? What happens if Bob doesn't leave on time? So I can use some of the clues in the question to help him. So if he doesn't leave on time, oh, we don't want a highlighter. Let's change the colour of the pen. We've got, here we go. He's going to leave on time. Can you spot the word leave? Here we go. He leaves. So I know my answer must be here in this section. My answer must be here in this section. If you'd like to be the reading detective, you can pause the video here and see if you can find the answer. This question is a thinking question. Okay, you've got to use the words to help you think of your own answer and what you think some of these words might mean. Okay, so pause the video here if you want to write the answer by yourself. Right, here we go. What happens if Bob doesn't leave on time? He must make sure he leaves by 9:15, otherwise he wouldn't make it to the moon by 9. So if he doesn't leave on time, what happens when, let's check the highlighter, what happens if you don't leave on time to get to school? If you leave later for leaving to get to school, what would happen? He wouldn't make it on time. He wouldn't make it to the moon by 9. And if he doesn't make it on time, that means that you're going to be late. So he wouldn't make it on time means that he's going to be late to get to work to the moon. Here we go. Bob starts work. His job as man on the moon is very important. He has to keep the moon clean and tidy. Quite often, astronauts drop sweet packets and cans. Some people say that aliens are responsible for much of the rubbish, but Bob knows that's not true. There's no such thing as aliens. Right, what's our question? Oh, here's another find a word. Find a word that shows that the people blame the aliens for leaving rubbish on the moon. So find a word that shows that, let's start again. Find a word that shows that people blame the aliens for leaving rubbish on the moon. So it's about blaming the aliens and rubbish. So I'm going to look for those key words. Let's take the highlighter off and choose a pen. Okay, so we're looking for aliens and the word and leaving rubbish. So in the first one, it says Bob starts work. His job as man on the moon is very important. He has to keep the moon clean and tidy. Quite often, astronauts drop sweet packets and aliens. Now, I didn't spot the word aliens and rubbish in there, which means my answer is going to be in the second part. This is where I need to be looking. Right, if you'd like to be a detective by yourself, then you may pause the video here. I'll read the question just before you pause the video. Find a word that shows that people blame the aliens for leaving rubbish on the moon. Right, if you want to find the word yourself, you may pause the video here. If you'd like to listen to that part of the text again, then you can stay. Some people say that aliens are responsible for much of the rubbish, but Bob knows that's not true. There's no such thing as aliens. So looking at what we've read here, we're looking for a word. If they're going to blame somebody, okay, what word is similar to blame? Well, does people mean blame? No. What about rubbish? So it can't be one of those. Now there's another word here. It says here, some people say that aliens are responsible. That means they blame the aliens for what they do. And here's the word responsible. Some people say that aliens are responsible for much of it. So that means they're blaming the aliens for what they are, for the rubbish that they throw. Right. That's the end of our comprehension session, and there will be more comprehension sessions next week. Enjoy your weekend, Gaudi, and we'll see you next week.